All right, here we are with our second edition of goal setting for Field Notes, down to earth leadership conversations here with Trevor. Trevor and I were just talking about using AI models to explore the research on goal setting because there is a lot. Trevor said he found a bunch of contradictions, which piques my curiosity. So, Trevor, what are some of the contradictions? Aren't goals always good?
Yeah, like that's we're always taught. We talked last time about SMART goals and everything else, and I'm one of those that I like to try and learn as much as I can about new things. AI being one of them. So I was like, hey, let's just look at some models that are out there. So looking at Gemini, ChatGPT, and Claude, and getting each one of them to kind of help me in the goal setting kind of research and discussion. And it is really interesting when you start looking at it about how SMART goals, the things that we've been told constantly are good, that the research that's out there, the contradictions is that if it's so rigid and you apply it to the wrong type of task, say a learning task versus a production task, right? SMART goals can be extremely bad, demotivating, cause people to basically shut off, as opposed to say more of a learning goal where you're trying to do two or hey, let's learn if we can do this two or three different ways and what the best way to do it, how that can have a drastically different impact than having some production goal on one of those things. So going back and forth and allowing AI to scour the internet for you and find all these contradictions is extremely useful, because if I were to do it by myself and go to the library or just, dig around and see what I could find by myself online, like, it'd take me hours and hours and hours to get this done, as opposed to, say, 20 seconds for them to give me like 15 different research papers that I can go and validate later on. But yeah, super useful looking at those sorts of things, and that just being one of the contradictions to our standard conventional knowledge on goal setting.
Yeah, so I got to put you on the spot here, and I will be full disclosure. I think I got it after thinking long and hard driving over to the climbing gym here. But do you know what SMART goals stand for? I know specific, achievable, or actionable, maybe timely.
Yeah, and I did the same thing. We hear about the SMART goals, and you're like, yeah, intuitively, and then people say them, and you're like, okay, that's right. But yeah, I think it was SMART, measure or specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely, or time bound.
Relevant. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep. The
yeah,
relevant was the one that I got stuck on. I just say that because like most people, we all talk about SMART goals. I would bet a lot of money that most people wouldn't know what all of those stand for at any given time. It's just a lot. And the research, frankly, says this, they should be specific and difficult. SMART is like, I guess someone wrote an article 20 or 30 years ago about them and it's stuck. And gosh, I wish I could write an article like that. But really specific and difficult and agreed upon or accepted. If you as a boss say, like, this is your goal, but your employees don't agree with it, it's not going to work. But that's a really interesting contradiction. I think goals put us in boxes. A friend sent me a podcast on 10x is easier than 2x. So if you're a business owner and you say, like, I want to double our growth next year, that's your goal, and you will shape all of your behaviors, everything around that goal. But maybe 10x was possible, and you won't do it. You don't accidentally get to 10x on your revenue. So you limit yourself potentially with goals. What are your thoughts on that?
yeah. Limiting yourself and not allowing yourself the flexibility based on environmental factors and things that change. Think of businesses back in 2020 that were rigid on what their targets were and their goals were for the year, and then COVID hit. Like, boom, everything that you were just doing completely got blown out of the water, as opposed to people that had a little bit more flexibility built into their goals, and like yours, 10x. We're gonna increase by, $10 million this year. And then if the environmental factors change, like, everybody's immediately demotivated. Or maybe you didn't consider the actual consumer base that could potentially drive that for you. it wasn't, it wasn't achievable or realistic. And how demotivating that is for the next round of goals that you're doing, as opposed to, something that's more of that learning phase of, hey, what can we do? But then again, you look at the research and they say, oh, give it your best, produce less in the
Yeah,
pulp mills or in the lumber industry than getting setting specific targets. So that makes me always go back and consider, like, what type of, what your thoughts are. Like, does it matter what type of individual and what type of team you're building with what type of goal you can give them?
I think extrinsically motivated people will do better with goals. I was reflecting earlier. I had a lot of goals when I was younger. I don't have as many now, and I'm still like being successful. I think in life, I just don't need that kind of structure to move forward as much. Maybe that's an excuse. Um, so I think the extrinsic motivators, some personalities like that better. Some personalities are more driven by intrinsic motivation. But I really think the environment is key here. In a complex environment, goals could kill you, right? Like you were saying, if things are shifting and changing, it's VUCA, whatever you want to call it, and you're like fixated on this goal, everybody's going to get down, or you're going to under realize your potential because things change. And I just taught my first organizational behavior class yesterday, and we talked about like what makes a successful organization. It's an article in HBR, and basically the author argues like, hey, Amazon like was a bookstore, and then the internet happened, and then they started Amazon Web Services, and then they vertically integrated their distribution. Like they're always changing, and so successful organizations change, they adapt. Period. But you can't really like your goal can't be like we're going to adapt 4 times this year. Like that wouldn't make sense. And if your goal and where those studies were done, where they said saying do your best doesn't work as well, was logging. It was like cutting trees. That's not a complex. I mean, it's complicated, but it's not complex. You cut trees, you stack them up, you count them at the end of the day. Having a goal there really helps because maybe you push yourself a little harder to get the extra 100 trees. And it does make my heart bleed to say that. They just to make toilet paper. Anyway, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's the production aspect of it. Like if you've got something that's repeatable and you can kind of scope down and narrow in, like again, I think goals are extremely useful in that context. But that, say you're mountain climbing, right? You want to go to Everest and you have to consider the weather and everything else. And like you said, goals can kill you, right? If you're 100% narrowly focused on reaching the top, right? You're not considering the weather and everything else that you have to do. You're going to get stuck, and you're quite possibly going to end up as one of those people that's stuck up there forever. As opposed to, hey, we can't do it this time, and um, what is the ultimate goal of that, or what is the ultimate outcome of that experience? Right? Is it learning, or is it the complete summit? What are you giving yourself some grace on as you're going through these things? Um, but yeah, that environment plays such a big factor, and it's not just the external environment that we have; it's actually the internal environment that I think people have as well. Like, I'm not going to be 100% set on a goal every single day, or 100% bought into it. As that environmental condition changes, my commitment to the goal is probably going to go up and down as well. Um, if something shifts drastically in that environment, it might not even be a goal that I align with anymore. If the company changes, right, and our values start to diverge in different directions, that's going to be something that affects, a team and an individual's commitment to the goal. So many different factors that I think, like you said, goals when you're younger, when you're doing those sorts of things are great and kind of more of, I would say, like an aspirational type of goal. And I really started looking at as I'm, you know, slowly getting into my transition from military into, retirement from and doing the civilian world type thing. Like I've been looking at goals a lot. Like when is my goal to get my businesses established? When is my goal to sell my house? When is my goal to buy a new house? When is my goal for all of these things? And then you start looking at it. I got this great checklist. It's amazing. But it is absolutely irrelevant because they're all interdependent. Right? If I sell my house,
Yeah.
maybe it gets sold next week. Maybe it sells in 3 months. Maybe it sells for more than I'm asking for. Maybe it sells for less than I'm asking for. That is dependent on, what I am able to buy depends on those two factors. All of this stuff starts to interrelate, and it can feel overwhelming until you actually kind of just calm down. Like, what am I trying to do? What are the sub steps to it? And what are the ones that I can control that are actually meaningful? So that's kind of helped me a lot looking at the environment and everything else together.
It's back to that complexity, like changing careers, transitioning out of the military, buying houses. Like the economy is a major factor in all of that. Like, yeah, if you have a hard set goal, I don't know. You could argue if you had a hard set goal, like I'm going to have a job that I'm making, $500,000 a year in this wonderful house in Seattle, whatever. Maybe you just find a way. Like some people would argue that, but like maybe you just get totally demoralized too. I probably would. Like if the economy went south and you're like, well, now I can't do anything. I don't know. But I do want to bring up a positive with goals too. I think about this a lot. Like the AMGA, American Mountain Guide Association, um, track, you have to do prerequisites to get certified as a climbing guide. And they're pretty hard. Like you have to climb 50 multi-pitch climbs, you have to climb 10A climbs. Those are all like stretch goals for me, per se. And the research says that goals should be difficult. And I remember being a little bit resentful. Like, I don't have to climb 510A to be a good guide. Like, why do I have to do this? And in reality, like, it forced me to push myself out of my comfort zone. And I really value it. I look back and like, I'm glad that they did that. I'm more confident as a guide. I feel like there's a high standard for this organization. So I'm curious what your thoughts are, both on goals as a forcing function to push us past limiters or fears, and also like what's the relationship between goals and standards? Because you could almost look at standards like, hey, we have a standard of excellence. If you actually line item what that means, you're kind of creating goals. So yeah, goals to get you past fear and limiters, or goals as standards. What are your thoughts?
So goals to get you past that's the stretch goals and those sorts of things. And that was one of the interesting ones that I started digging into. And I think that one is really dependent on what type of goal and what type of person you are, and understanding that. Like you said, there might be some people that are like in the transition that I find myself in that are like, I'm gonna make $500,000. And like, whether it's fear or determination, whatever you want to call it, that they make it happen. I'm not that dude. I don't need to make that much. Like it's fantastic.
Yeah,
Whatever. More power
450K.
to you. More power to you if you want to do that sort of stuff. Um, but yeah, I think there's as long as somebody believes in the goal, I think the stretches are good. Like if it aligns with their values, it aligns with stuff that they like, that they truly are bought into. I think a stretch goal is good. But there's also research out there that says if you get a goal that's that is something that somebody doesn't believe, right? If you look at the expectancy, do they think they can achieve it? That they'll just completely shut off right off the get go and won't even try it. Which is interesting because if you look back, I can't remember. I think Rosalind Carter is always the one that's attributed with the quote for the, a great leader is someone who takes people where they know that they should be, as opposed to just leading somebody, which is exactly that, right? It's taking somebody out of their comfort zone and putting them in situations that you, as a leader, believe that they can adapt and get into, but that they don't think they can right now. Whereas if we just if we stuck with that expectancy of does that person believe and perceive that they can do it, and they just shut down. So there's an interesting, back and forth
Yeah.
on that one of is it true or is it not?
My
Um,
my wife is one of the best leaders I know, and one of the things that makes her a really great leader, she holds really high standards. And as a professor, everywhere in my life, I think about that. Like, I don't want to crush people or make people feel small. Like, I want to be kind and all these things. But really, like, people want high standards, and the best teams and best organizations have and hold high standards. She was a Marine for 10 years. The Marines aren't like, oh, you know what? Like, if you can't meet the time standard on the run, like, it's okay. No, they kick you out because they need people who can meet that standard in combat. The AMGA isn't like, if you're uncomfortable climbing hard climbs, like, we'll just waive that requirement. But no, you're a mountain guide. If you can't climb hard climbs, you should get a different right. And I think that really motivates people, provided, to your point, they can meet them. And so one of the things in the research that I think is really interesting is there valence? Like, is it valuable? Becoming a mountain guide, it wasn't like oh, this would be a nice, cool thing to do. It's like, well, I can't have a business taking leaders outdoors rock climbing if I can't guide them. So I had to, right? So it was very valuable. And efficacy, meaning you've seen people do it, you think you can do it, you believe in your capability to learn and grow and do the thing. So maybe part of it, like, good leadership is holding really high standards, but also nurturing those other, like, hey, this is why the standard matters, and here's why I think you can do it. What do you think?
yeah, in short, um, absolutely. And I'm one of those guys. Like I have high standards, and the reason that I say that kind of hesitantly is through the course of my career, it's been really interesting, right? Working with different organizations, uh, all within all within the military, and seeing the different subcultures that exist. Right? We talk about all this stuff kind of individually and set apart, and in theory, like everything briefs really well on paper. It briefs really well. You get into the real world and start to try and apply a lot of these things, which is obviously where a lot of the viewers of the podcast here are going to be thinking about is like, how can I apply this to my organization? And some of the things that I always ran into problems with standards is, my counterparts as leaders in organizations, a different branch or a different division that's within the same overarching organization. Like if my standards are extremely high and I hold my people to that standard, but my peer does not, and there's no real accountability, there's no real reward for the differentiation between the two, that is extremely hard for a leader to maneuver around and still maintain motivation, still have some semblance of, hey, we need to uphold standards, we need to have goals, we need to have all this other stuff. When your peers in the other organization, their subordinates don't have to have
Yeah,
those things, and they're still getting the signal. They still get a paycheck. It's consistent. They don't have to, they're not. They have the same level of performance reports. Whether they're actually growing, they're not growing, but they're just happy with it. People that you're stretching and trying to grow with the high standards is really that's that interesting dynamic when you have large organizations and you're trying to quote unquote compete with your peers as far as leaders when there's no uh, it's not a high standard across the board. When we do research for special forces teams and then try to apply that research to the general population, it's almost like you're pretty much doing yourself to fail because they're two completely mindsets as you're going through. And as I was reading through some of the books and the literature, we're talking at the highest level in sports, right? Everybody likes to use, oh, well, this person did these sorts of things and it allowed them to get to the top of the sport. Yeah, well, that's cool. That's like 1 in 20 million, right? That
Tom
was
Brady's MVP, so I'm not going to do that. I just
right.
can't.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, but trying to apply those sorts of lessons to the general population is, it's one of those that always confuses me and makes me dig in further and go, it's well on paper, but is it really applicable?
Yeah. I want to go back to, we kind of started with this pyramid or upside down pyramid. I don't remember, but it starts at vision. And I'm thinking about teaching right now. I just started teaching this week at USD, and I hold pretty high standards. Like I quiz my class. I quiz my class on the first day of class. They're like, "Whoa, what is happening?" Like normally we just like cover the syllabus and get out early. I'm like, "No, we're gonna quiz because this causes learning." But frankly, like my goal is that everyone gets 100%. I'm not like, I hope that half of you failed this quiz. We have high standards here. My goal is that they learn the material, and I know that quizzing will help lead to learning material. So I think if you're in an organization with varying levels of standards across the board, I think as a leader, if your vision's really clear, uh, you can do that. And I've seen that work well on debts that I've led and things like that in the Navy. And as a leader, if you're just like, look, we have shinier shoes than other people because we're hard. We do more burpees. People are like, who is this guy? Like, get out of here. That's frustrating because there's no vision behind it other than we're better than other people. We have high standards. So I don't know. What do you think? Does that ring true or no?
They definitely have to see that vision. They have to they have to understand where they're going and truly buy into it. Otherwise, it's just everybody's just going to go through the motions. And I think that's with everything that we do. Like if it's not meaningful to you, whether that is through some intrinsic motivation that you have, like personal meaning, passion, dedication that you've got, or whether it's an external reward that you've had, right? There's got to be something that they see and that they quote unquote believe in that is worthwhile to expend the limited energy that they have in order to get there. One thing that you said that was really interesting to me is that brings up a potential contradiction, interesting dynamic with goals, right? You starting out in class, right? You want to make sure that your students, just like any professor should, you want to make sure your students are learning as much as possible. They have the academic rigor, they have that pushing them. But looking at it from the university's perspective, if their goal is to increase revenue, but you're hard right up front and it causes students to drop courses and pull out, right? Then that's directly contradictory to what their goals are. So, what about goals and nesting with the higher organization to ensure that everybody's on the same page, right? That's the true highest functioning organization possible, which I would argue is like damn near impossible, right? To get a very large organization where everything nests correctly. But what do you think about
Yeah,
nesting goals all the way down and how to kind of deal with that when you've got two that are in friction?
yeah, that is a great question, and we're running up on time here. But I think yes, the universities, one of their goals is to make revenue, and ultimately, if students don't feel like they're getting value, they they'll quit the university, not just the class, right? The business school will get ranked lower because it's not as rigorous. People won't get as good of jobs coming out of the business school. So there is a unintended consequence of making classes too easy. And also, at least what I've seen from my wife leading, and I think in a lot of my experience, if you get buy-in, so we're back to that acceptance, like, hey, this is important. You can do this. You have efficacy. It's going to lead to good things. If you have the buy-in, high standards motivate the heck out of people, my students included. Like the first day, they're not super motivated to have a quiz, but by the end of the class, they're recommending my class to other students because you're like, I learned a lot. Like it was useful. My time wasn't wasted. I didn't just go into class, like look at the syllabus and then leave. What a gross waste of someone's time. Like you're an adult, read the syllabus. You can do that on your own. So that would be my answer, and you'll have to rebut it next time because we're running out of time. Um, for what I'm taking away the from this conversation, really, goals work really well in predictable environments. they don't work as well and can even be detrimental or dangerous in complex environments. And so, as a business owner, as a leader, you have to figure out when you're in a predictable or a complex environment and tailor what kind of goals you're setting. High standards work really well when they're nested under a clear, compelling vision or mission. High standards without a clear and compelling vision or mission just frustrate people and make them want to leave. Those are my two takeaways. What are you walking away with today?
Yeah, definitely the environmental factors that you were talking about, and how the specific goals can be detrimental. I think goals in general are very useful, right? I find myself using goals all the time, but I also find myself using flexible goals all the time, or giving myself the ability to reassess, which gets into feedback, which I know we don't have nearly the time, but the criticality of a feedback loop for any type of a goal that you've got. And we can discuss that next time. Uh, but this is, I probably say that's the biggest thing is the environmental conditions really set what type of goal you're going to have, and then the flexibility to adjust based off of any new information that pops up as a result of the feedback that you're constantly monitoring.
Those are great takeaways. And yes, we maybe we'll have to do a whole one of these on feedback. That is critical. I think I wrote on our outline like a goal without feedback is like having a great ship with strong wind and no compass. Just like hard charging in some direction. So
Yep.
good, good stuff. I appreciate the conversation, Trevor. And we'll see you next week. Probably talking about emotions, but we'll see.
There
Yes.
we go. It was great, Nate.